For 22 months, I've wanted to take him by the shoulders and shake him and scream at him. And that was my chance to do it.
Victims of the Tucson shootings finally have their chance to face Jared Loughner as he learns he will never be a free man again. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Steve Irvin. Loughner ordered today to serve 7 consecutive life sentences plus 140 years in federal prison. It is all for the January 2011 shooting rampage that killed 6 people and wounded 13 others, including former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Katie Bramwell is anchoring our coverage today in Tucson. And Katie, I know you've been down there all day long. Tell us what it was like being around all of these people who have been intimately affected by what happened that day.
Yeah, in a phrase, incredibly intense inside there. I mean, pretty much all of us were thinking, how in the world do you even go about confronting the person who tried to take your life? Now, no cameras were allowed in the courtroom once again, so we rely solely to express what had happened in there on with sketches, and for the first time, tweets. Now, one of the most anticipated people speaking there, Commander Mark Kelly, spoke for Gabrielle Giffords. Gabrielle Giffords, radiant and ready for this day. She stared at Jared Loughner the entire time. And Commander Mark Kelly might command space shuttles, but this may have been one of his most important missions of all. In fact, he said in court, addressing Jared directly, Mr. Loughner, by making death and producing tragedy, you sought to extinguish the beauty of life, to diminish potential, to strain love, and to cancel ideas. You tried to create for all of us a world as dark and evil as your own. But know this, and remember this always, Mr. Loughner, you failed. It was one of the moments that had all of us struck. ABC 15's Corey Rangel right there in the courtroom as well. You've been following this case since the beginning, getting to know so many of these victims. And one of the things that we also noticed is not every person got up and spoke inside the courtroom today.
Yeah, Bill Badger was inside the court but chose not to address the court. We did talk to him afterwards. He's a retired colonel with the Army. He's a man in his 70s, and he helped tackle Jared Loughner until authorities arrived. And he says, like many other victims, when you come to the courthouse, you can't help but think what happened. And he talked about his vivid and haunting flashbacks that he still has.
But I knew there was something tragic happening. And as the individual went down along the line shooting everybody, why, all of a sudden he stopped and looked at me, and I wasn't right in the chairs or right in front of the Safeway. I was out about 10 feet, right on the curb. And when he got about 10 feet from me, he pointed the gun at me and looked. And then when he reached and grabbed it with this hand, why, I ducked. And when I ducked, I felt the bullet go right across the back of my head.
It's still haunting for Bill Badger there. And I want to briefly talk about Jared Loughner. A lot of people asked about him. Today he sat pretty much emotionless in court, despite hearing all the testimony and seeing all the people. And even when he heard that he'll be spending the rest of his life in prison, not much reaction. He was wearing a dark brown dress-up shirt. It's the first time we've seen him outside of a jail uniform, and likely the last, after being given 7 life sentences, 1 life sentence for each of the victims killed, and then another for the attempted assassination of Congresswoman Giffords.
Yeah, the only time I saw his expression change at all was when his jaw dropped open ever so slightly when he actually saw Gabby Giffords for the first time. And as we have learned through this whole trial, he didn't believe for so long that she could have even survived what he had done to her. So it was a pretty incredible scene in
Powerful
court today.
moment.
Sure was, Corey. I'm glad you were in there with us as well. You know, these lives, as we've learned so much, have been woven together, but really today we learned even more about the tapestry that holds them together.
Judge John Roll was my first supervisor in the Pima County Attorney's Office. I prosecuted cases in his courtroom when he later took the bench. Ron Barber and I, we double dated in high school. I've known him for, I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it's been a very, very long time. I knew Gabby Giffords when she very first ran for the state legislature and worked with her on criminal justice measures and issues there. And Gabe Zimmerman I knew when he was a baby because his father, Ross, was my first IT director in the Pima County Attorney's Office.
So you understand what this has done to this community. Also, victim Pam Simon, who we've gotten to know so well. We knew she was an educator, but today we also learned she was once a teacher at a middle school. And while she was there, the school had a student who loved music. And today it was revealed that student was Jared Loughner. Some chilling connections, some chilling timing that we're just learning more about today. And Steve, I was sitting there in the first chair there today. I was able to study everybody's faces, every victim's face to the right, able to look directly at Jared Loughner. I could see his mom sobbing in the courtroom, leaning forward, rocking with tears, her curled silver hair falling forward, a very red face full of anguish. And when everything was over, Jared stood up to walk out of the room. His mom watched him longingly as he left. He never once looked back.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what it must be like for his parents. They're often forgotten in all of this. Katie, I know you well enough to know that you were pretty overwhelmed by everything that you saw today. I guess that's sort of a sense of how this tragedy has affected not only that entire community, but the entire nation.
Yeah, you know, it's something that we haven't touched on too much, but they were even talking after the court proceedings today about how the Aurora shootings in Colorado had affected so many people here and how that was such a difficult thing for them. And a lot of them had brought up how they want to see things change in a broader discussion in Tucson, in Arizona, and in America about how things can get better for all of us.
Yeah, so many people determined to find some good in all of this. Thank you, Katie.
Yes.
And Katie and the rest of the ABC 15 News team in Tucson gathering much more reaction after today's sentencing. Look for more later on ABC 15 News at 10 or, of course, anytime on abc15.com.